Having a lead character in a movie that doesn't speak is kind of becoming a thing. There was Willy's Wonderland, No One Will Save You, and now Silent Night. Director John Woo teams up with Joel Kinnaman to bring us a holiday revenge story. So is it going to sing from the rafters, or will it have laryngitis? A grieving father enacts his long-awaited revenge against a ruthless gang on Christmas Eve. So I knew Joel Kinnaman wasn't going to have any dialogue in this movie. But what I didn't realize is that the rest of the cast also wouldn't be speaking. The only dialogue we hear is over police radios or an FM radio station DJ, and that's minimal. John Woo, he's known for doing some very artsy action thrillers like Paycheck, Broken Arrow, most famously Face Off. Here, he does his best to employ some artistic camera movements and effects, but it feels like he's off his game. In one of the opening scenes, we see Kinnaman's wife running through a hallway, and the camera freezes the frame and then zooms in on her eye 3 separate times. Yeah, seriously. I mean, she takes a step, the camera zooms, then it pops back out for her to take another step, and then the zooming again happens. 3 times in a row, this is what we see. And all that we could do in the audience was just laugh incredulously because it was so bizarre and tonally out of place. Now, since I've already started this review by tearing into the negatives, I might as well just continue and then end with the positives. This movie, it is dreadfully slow. It's an action movie that starts out with an enigmatic action sequence, which then we get a little bit of understanding of what's going on later. But then, for about 40 minutes, we watch Kinnaman just grieving around his house, staying consistently drunk, and then finally deciding that he's going to plot revenge on those who hurt his family. Now, I'm all for training montages too, especially when we watch an everyman try to take out goons. Thankfully, here we get to witness physical weakness, horrible marksmanship, and then just general ignorance about fighting. Then, after some time, we watch him improve until he's a lethal killing machine similar to John Wick. The problem is, though, that it takes way too long to get to this point. The pacing is slow and dreadfully boring. And then, to top it all off, all while we watch Kinnaman's character just mope about, he's also completely ignoring his wife. I mean, she still has to get up and go to work, pay the bills, carry on some semblance of life after the tragedy that they endure. But he's completely selfish and wrapped up so much in his own world that she's not even an afterthought for him. Now, from a narrative perspective, I know all of these behaviors are to illustrate how broken and depressed Kinnaman is. But what actually happens is that he becomes an unsympathetic character that is then tough to root for when he starts to get his crap together. Now, there's a point in the latter half of the film when Kinnaman dons his war wear and he's getting ready to exact his revenge. Now, I have zero clue if this was intentional or not, but his outfit looks exactly like he was preparing for Columbine. And I'm not making light of that tragedy, but the outfit that he puts on is a Kevlar vest with guns strapped to each side, a shotgun hanging off the front of his vest, and then it's all concealed by a long black leather coat. I mean, it was very reminiscent of what the terrorists wore when they attacked the school. Now, because of the lack of dialogue, there's a ton of disconnect with the characters. We spend the most time with Kinnaman, so we understand his thinking and motives. And while we see the wife and know what's going on kind of through her head, she's only sympathetic because of her circumstances. And then Kid Cudi plays a detective within a gang task force. Now, I'm not quite sure what his role in this was at all. I mean, he was great in X, but in this, he's a wasted talent who only gets a few minutes of valuable screen time at the very end of the movie. Even the villains are just thugs. Their involvement, while happenstance, is also generic and ill-defined. Now, I do like the makeup on one of the dudes because he has this trash polka tattoo that is all across his head and his face. I mean, it was awesome and freaky all at once. Now, I want to go back to Kinnaman's character and his selfishness for a second. There's a point at the end of the film where he's having visions or memories, or maybe they're even fantasies, and in all of them, his wife isn't present. And it's really odd, and I understand it can be a realistic view of grief, but this once more reinforced that he wasn't ever thinking about how his family dealt with the tragedy, only himself. Now, one final bit of negatives for this is that the characters have some serious plot protection. I mean, good and bad guys alike. Multiple people incur gnarly wounds that rightfully would have killed them within seconds, but the characters pop back up, and after staggering for maybe a bit, they dive right back into the fray as if nothing really happened. Now, this didn't bother me too much because I was watching for the action and the violence, and if a character prolongs their death to keep a fight going, hey, I'm good with overlooking some implausibility. Now, once the action for this movie kicks in, it was pretty exciting and very brutal too. From the first fight that happens, the shock that appears on characters' faces, as well as the pure exhaustive exertion of adrenaline to stay alive, the fights are wonderfully captured with minimal quick cuts. And from there, we get vehicle chases that are choreographed and shot in immersive fashion, with cars dodging in and out of alleyways and tight streets, narrowly missing and then sometimes barreling right through obstacles. Plus, there's almost nonstop gunfire, maintaining the energy for the sequence, but also increasing the potential for peril. Now, the final sequence is partially a one shot that looks great as we follow Kinnaman up a winding staircase. This also reminded me a bit of the stair scene in John Wick 4, but not as well executed and then plainly different just because of the layout. Now, you have to cast off believability during this scene, but by doing so, we are rewarded with crazy hand to hand fighting and brutal gunplay. I felt the tension as this was reaching its conclusion. People were dying all over the place, and Kinnaman wasn't walking around unscathed. There are times when it's unclear if he's going to meet his objective. Now, I still think there's a massive level of ridiculousness for the final action sequence, but it does work, and because it's drastically more entertaining and engaging than the first half of the movie, I was even more excited by what was going on, even if that sense of joy was false. Now, because there wasn't any dialogue, the score played a large role in carrying the emotional beats of the story. There were very few times when some sort of musical background wasn't playing, filling the void from just the lack of speaking. Now, I liked the music, and I thought it fit to create the right auditory aesthetic. So overall, the action in Silent Night is the only thing that saves this bore fest from becoming a total dumpster fire. Joel Kinnaman is convincing in the role of grieving father, while also transitioning from mild-mannered everyman to butt-kicking hero. The pacing is dreadful, creating a snoozer that's tough to wake up from as the action begins. The gimmick of no dialogue, it's a risky choice, and in this instance, it doesn't pay off, creating a massive lack of connection with any of the characters. Shortening up the first half of the story and giving other characters something to do besides move through the frame grunting would help this be more watchable, but the story remains generic and uninspired, following ideas that have been retread many times before. There's no sex or nudity, obviously there's no profanity because there's no dialogue, and an immense amount of bloody violence. I give Silent Night 2 out of 5 couches. This is certainly not worth spending your cash on to see in the theater. I wish I would have known that before I dropped a chunk of change to take my family with me. Hopefully, though, this is going to save you cash and time. So what's a movie you're looking forward to seeing in the next few months? Let me know about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this review, please give it a like. Also, don't forget to share and subscribe. I'm Chris. This is Movies and Munchies. Thanks for couching with me. And one more thing, because I know people are going to ask, no, surprisingly, there are no doves in this movie. I don't know what's going on. There is one bird, but it's not a dove. So, I don't know, maybe John Woo is just going away from that altogether.